Hey guys, it's the month of May, and you know what that means? That officially means it's a PETA Heritage Month. And I wanted to make this video and just kind of talk through what I'm feeling when it comes to this month because if you didn't know, I'm from a Desi heritage. My parents were both born from India, and reflecting back on my Asian heritage is something that I really didn't start doing until I got into college because to kind of circle back and start from the beginning, when I was born, grew up my entire life in the South, and I was born in a small town in Alabama. So when I went to school, there were not many kids that looked like me. So you can see how big of a stark contrast that is when you grow up in an area where not a lot of people look like you. And for the longest time, I tried to assimilate or try to fit in with all the kids that went to school with me. And if you were to ask any Asian American that grew up in America, whether they're the first generation born here, pretty much they can all relate to this story. It's a story that's synonymous between everybody of Asian descent trying to assimilate with people, trying to fit in, not really knowing who you're supposed to fit in with, and always feeling, you're not fully Indian, but you're not fully American, and you're kind of like this weird mishposh, like weird 50-50 of the group. But going through school, I kind of faced that dichotomy, or like that feeling of not really knowing where I fit in. And I felt like that throughout like all elementary, middle school, and high school. And there were so many times where I tried to shield away from my own Indian heritage by not, listening to the songs, listening to Bollywood songs, watching Bollywood movies, but more trivial, way past the trivial things of that, but just fully embracing, my culture. And a lot of times I tried to shield my way from that culture and just tried to fit in completely into American culture just so I could fit in and be friends with, the quote unquote cool kids, or the kids that were, doing well off for themselves in high school. And it wasn't until I got into college when I started making friends that were Asian, that were Indian, that were from all sorts of cultures at UGA that I started to understand the significance of embracing my own culture, and understood that it's okay to own your culture and to, be proud of it, and, have that on your back, and, have that be something where you can contribute something really well to society. And I think I didn't start feeling that when I got into college. And I think the reason when I got into college I started to feel that was because I had a community around me, a community that was willing to support me, and people that were, that looked like me, that were trying to do the same things I was doing, whether that was in sports media or media. And specifically when I entered college, I decided to go into the journalism sports media path. And as you know, it's getting a little bit better now, but as you know, that there are not a lot of, especially in sports media, there are not a lot of sports Asian journalists, thriving in sports media, especially when I was little. It's definitely gotten better now, but when I entered college at UGA, there weren't that many. In fact, when I think about it, in my local or in my student newspaper, there was maybe 2 people that were that were Indian descent, and then in my sports media program, there were just 3 of us that were from Asian descent, and everyone else was, from America. And no fault of anyone. Everyone I worked with were completely awesome, but when you don't see that representation, it's really tough. And I remember one of the big carrying forces that helped me, propel me into my sports media career was thinking about the fact that, hey, if I do really well in my sports media career path, I can be a voice, or I can be a visual representation to a child that's wanting to pursue this career path, and be able to show their parents that, hey, someone that looks like us is doing really well in this field that's not typically an Asian dominated field. And I carried that weight on my shoulder because, if you grow up in an Asian household, that typically for a lot of my friends that are of Asian descent, the households they grew up in, there was a very big focus on them to get careers in the STEM field, business field, doctors, lawyers, all the stereotypical fields that you think about. And I know a lot of them, when I would tell them about, hey, I'm pursuing this career path, I know a lot of them would just get this big sigh of relief, or this this congratulatory tone, I can't say the word, of saying that, hey, this is awesome, I wish I could do that. And I remember when I would hear those words, I always felt this big need to, like, okay, now I have to kind of carry on that legacy and just try to do my best, so that way I can kind of be the voice of the voiceless almost, or create that representation that wasn't there. And I carried that on for most of college, and that helped kind of propel me forward. And I remember I first heard about AAJA, the Asian American Journalists Association, and I thought it was like the coolest thing in the world, because in that organization you saw people that were Asian, that were Asians, and there were also that looked like me, that were thriving in the sports media world, and it was just a great community to help build each other up, lift each other up, and create opportunities in a space that's predominantly controlled by, or predominantly, you know, controlled by people that are of white descent. So seeing that, seeing Asians kind of thrive in that area was really inspiring for me, and I took great onus on, you know, wanting to be that next person to come up. And I will say at UGA, I think they did a pretty good job. I remember one time, I think it was my sophomore year. Yeah, it was my sophomore year around April, like towards the latter end of the year, like basically in May, when PETA Heritage Month was going on, the organizations across UGA held this a PETA retreat, which was, it was basically one day, and you spent maybe 8 hours, and it was like in this like small little auditorium hall. And it was so interesting because I remember that was legitimately the first time I heard about so many progress, or so many stories about the Asian American stories that are never told in American history. If you grow up in America, when you go through history class, you know, you probably know this, you hear about pre-revolutionary war, revolutionary war, you hear a ton about the Civil War, you hear about the Civil War, then you hear about, you know, the Civil Rights Movement, but you never hear about the Asian American struggle or the Asian American kind of stories in American history. And I remember when I was going into school, in elementary, middle school, or high school, I was like, man, what if you're an Asian person? I wonder if life was just easy. But, you know, going to that retreat, I really understood and got a full picture, or full broad scope, I think is a better word to describe it, of, you know, kind of the atrocities and like the suffering that Asian Americans had, you know, when they first immigrated into the United States, especially with Japanese immigrants, Chinese immigrants, you know, internment camps during World War II. It's something that's never talked about, and it's almost kind of brushed away in American society and in American history books. And I know a big talking point between people that are in my age group, because I'm 24 years old right now, the people that are younger than me and older than me, especially in the Asian American community, is the model minority myth. And essentially the model minority myth is, you know, when you think about it, when you view Asian Americans in America, when you view them, it's almost in the light of they're going to be very well studious, going to follow the law, going to be obedient, they're going to make a lot of money, they're going to be well contributing people to society. And I know that's something that a lot of people are trying to debunk, because in turn, when you create that, it creates like this expectation that, you know, Asian Americans aren't supposed to be athletes, they're not supposed to be creatives, they're not supposed to be photographers, videographers, creative people, art directors, all this brilliant stuff that you see across American society. You know, that model minority doesn't fit that. And I know a lot of the people I now call as friends and colleagues and people that I have met, that, you know, they're probably the most creative people I know. So when I was on that PETA Heritage Retreat, it was just such an eye-opening thing, like I said, just hearing about all those stories that I had just never once heard about growing up in America. And fast forwarding from that, you know, joining the Asian American Journalists Association, and then right after graduation, when COVID hit, or when the pandemic hit, and then starting my first job with NBC Sports, and, you know, when eventually I transitioned over to Bleacher Report, I did mention earlier on about this kind of this burden of like wanting to kind of carry that story or that mantle of like, hey, I want to be the person to succeed here, so I can showcase, like if someone younger than me can point to me and almost look at it as like, okay, if they can do it and they look like me, then I can go ahead and pursue it. I remember that was a big thing, and I remember around the time when I was thinking about quitting and leaving sports, when I eventually did, that was kind of a thought that I thought about, where it's like, man, I'm going to be leaving, and, you know, now people that were trying to pursue this, they're not going to have someone to look for. And it really hurt me, because I was like, this was one of the things I wanted to do. But when I stopped and took a second to think about, okay, I am leaving the sports world, but my creative journey isn't stopping because I'm leaving sports. My creative journey, actually, I feel like it's just starting, and it's restarting, and it's kicking off into a whole new sphere, because I'm trying to put my effort into YouTube. I launched my own photography business, video business, and I want to be a creative person that can help tell stories for people. And, you know, if I can make this a successful run, create a successful business, then that is an example, or that is a representation in its own. And after I took out of the scope of just looking at it through sports, it really gave me a lot of hope, and it gave me a lot of energy to, you know, continue to work hard. And one thing that also, you know, helps kind of persuade me and helps, motivate me is a better word to say, is when I see my other friends that are Asian Americans, killing it in the sports world or in any type of media. Like I mentioned earlier, I have friends that are baseball beat writers, basketball beat writers, creating their own sports brand. They're managers at big multimedia like sports companies, and it's just awesome to see that because it shows that the dynamic is shifting, and it's the paradigm is shifting, and you're starting to see more Asian American representation in areas that we typically didn't see that before. We're starting to see Asian athletes, Asian American athletes killing it in tennis, golf, football, basketball, soccer. Anything you could think of, there's now starting to get that representation, and sooner or later you wouldn't be surprised when you're going to see NBA MVPs being Asian Americans, football players, college football players at major D1 schools, NFL players killing it in the league. And you're starting to see a little bit of that representation starting to show up now, and in 10, 15 years from now, it's just going to blossom into something greater, and it's going to be an awesome thing to see, because for so long, so many of my friends, and personally I have experienced this, growing up in a small town in America, you don't see that representation. You're always trying to fiddle in, you're trying to find your way, you're trying to mingle in with people, and you're trying to kind of move away from the culture that makes you who you are and assimilating into other cultures. But seeing people thrive in media or any type of walk of life that they're in, seeing people thrive and do really well in those types of fields is just gonna give the younger generation more energy and more power to just be freely themselves and not be ashamed of being ashamed of their heritage and not being ashamed of their culture, and instead of being ashamed, inviting their culture and embracing it and making it who they are. And that's when they can do that just makes me really happy, because it shows that the world is changing and the world is shifting. And the more we can get the younger generation to feel that, and the older generation, even me myself, starting to embrace it even more and not being afraid and not apologizing for being who I am. And finally, I think this was kind of like a longish talk, but finally I want to kind of leave you guys with this, is that the best way to support Asian American creators is to fully support their work, whether that's liking, sharing, engaging with their content, supporting their content, and being a voice for them, because there are so many Asian creators that make so much great work and they're doing such great things, and obviously make it authentic. If you truly like their work, support their work, buy their work, share their work, do everything you can to support them and create a space for them so they can continue to grow, because it's only going to get better from here, and it can only get better if we all put in collectively our effort to help support each other and lift each other up. So in the comment section below, I'm actually going to leave links and social links to all my favorite creators. A lot of them are in the sports space, but I'm going to try my best to kind of link all the Asian American creators that I know, that I personally know, and that I either personally know or really love their work. I'm going to try to split it up into different spaces, but this is just a great list to kind of get started on, and try to support their work and check out their work and see if you like it, because there's a multitude of brilliant people just all across the board that are thriving and really doing great work out there, and I just want to use this space to help kind of connect everyone with them and help support their work, because they've helped motivate me intrinsically, and I want to pay that back to them going forward. Thanks again for watching. With love and respect, Yash.